The definite way to meet God. Call on me in the day of trouble. I'll deliver you, and you will honor me. Psalm 50:15. Being a long-time churchgoer, I fell into a dilemma. I began to feel tired of my habitual and perfunctory life of faith. Behold God, leave everything with God, and love God. All this advice sounded too abstract and vague to me. While I wished to learn more specifically as to what I should do and how to have a true practical relationship with God, there was no one to give me any clear guidance. I hoped to meet someone who could share their personal experience of controlling their mind by the power of God. I was losing every single battle against myself. And the miserable feeling after losing the battle was simply unbearable. I knew that a personal encounter with God would solve this problem. But how could I meet that God? Like a thirsty deer, I wandered around seeking for a clear answer. All my empty heart was left with was sadness, having absolutely nothing, even when I'd been going to church and believing in God for a long time. My empty and lonely soul was becoming hardened and dying daily. No matter what, I wanted to find the solution to my misery. Earnest desire for the experience of meeting God, hearing His voice, and self surrender surged from deep down in my heart. I thought such experience would be impossible to attain by learning from someone else. Instead, it could only come by making a personal effort to experience it. So I made finding the solution my top priority. Only then did I decide to read the Bible continuously, which I hadn't had enough patience to persistently read up until this time. And I promised God, if you'd only let me to understand your word, I will obey and follow without argument. Help me. With resolute determination, I began to read the Bible. A few days into reading the Bible, something piqued my conscience while I was reading 1 Corinthians 13:4. I had read this verse countless times before, but this time I was seeing it from a different perspective. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. I wasn't patient or kind. I was always easily angered and kept record of all wrongs. I decided now to live according to this word, and I made a promise to God. Now, I no longer would think of people's faults or weakness, get angry easily, and I would be kind. It was a decision which is not possible to keep by man's power alone. One day, my husband and I were about to get into a fight when the two thoughts came into my mind. The thoughts of the two gods. They were of heaven and the world. That day, I realized the fact that men are not capable of creating their own thoughts. Rather, the thoughts come from either the God of heaven or Satan, the God of this world. Therefore, you shall have no other gods before me. Exodus 23. Good or evil is decided in the choice we make between the thoughts of the two gods that come into our mind. The voices of the two gods ring in our minds at every moment, but the power to choose is with man. I could feel the state of hearing the two voices in the form of a debate, conflict, stress, concern, anxiety, or jealousy. As I was about to attack my husband, God said to me, "You have decided firmly not to flare up anymore. Try to let this crisis pass by. Otherwise, you will end up regretting a lot after your anger dies down. However, the God of this world was telling me, just pour out all your anger as if this is the last time. You can be patient next time. Because this time your husband has really done you wrong. The two voices persistently talked to me. My mind turned into a battleground. Unbearable rage and anger were literally driving me crazy. The heavenly God spoke to me again. Leave the place now. It's dangerous. You should not explode. Move now. While the God of the world told me, flare up and yell at him right now. Let it explode for this last time and hold it back starting tomorrow. Which one should I choose? My body trembled from the uncontrollable rage amidst this extreme conflict. I struggled so hard in between the two voices. Let it out. No, hold it. I must make a choice, but I couldn't make up my mind. In the middle of this extremely difficult situation, I began to tilt little by little toward choosing the heavenly God. First of all, I chose to leave the site. I rushed out the room, and I cried out toward heaven for help to hold back my anger. Meanwhile, the two gods kept trying to talk to me. The hard, distressing, and fierce battle against myself went on for a while. It was harder than any other fight I had ever fought. Yet, I decided to not give up and follow the voice of the heavenly God. I realized later that it is considered double-mindedness when one is hesitant to obey the will of God of heaven. When in such a state of mind, God will not answer our prayer. Only when one among the two choices is decided on, will the heavenly power come down. I firmly decided to overcome this moment by holding back my anger. Once firmly determined, I cried out in my mind to heaven, Jesus, please help me. With all my soul and might, I called upon him. The moment I made up my mind and called to God, the miracle happened. The power from heaven came into my mind and melted away my anger. And the heavenly peace replaced the anger in my heart. I was now filled with the heavenly joy. I had now finally met God. So, that's how I experienced what it is like to recognize the voice of God, to have a personal encounter with Him, and to self-surrender. I finally learned to control my feelings and emotions. I could finally feel what it is to possess the heavenly peace and joy which aren't exchangeable with anything in the whole world. Beholding God is about thinking about Him at all times, fixing one's mind and spirit onto Jesus and calling upon Him. Living everything with God means praying and no longer worrying about it. It is like a mathematical formula. First, decide to obey the will of the God of heaven. Second, call upon Jesus. Whenever the voices of the two gods came into my mind, I followed the formula. I made a decision and then called upon God to experience His help without fail. In the midst of countless situations and instances in my life, I was now convinced that this was the true formula. He has never disappointed me or refused to help me. Every time I called upon Him to help me escape the temptation of sin and to cut myself off from sin, He always came to me and enabled me to overcome. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire from which I would have never been able to escape on my own. He is my God, my Savior.